The following is a special presentation. Eyewitness News and the Providence Journal bring you live coverage. Now, Campaign 2014, the Republican Gubernatorial Debate.
Live from the Providence Performing Arts Center, the first televised debate between the Republican candidates for governor. Good evening, I'm Tim White. We have a lot of important issues to discuss tonight in a race that is heating up. Both Republicans have already taken to the airwaves with attack ads, raising questions about each other's credentials. And tonight, we aim to flesh that out. The candidates looking for your vote in the Republican primary for governor are, from left to right on your screen, Ken Block and Allan Fung. We'll hear from them in a moment. For the next 60 minutes, we'll be going in depth. This debate is airing live on WPRI 12 and WPRI.com. I'll be moderating this debate and asking questions along with our panel. WPRI.com reporter Ted Nisi, and from our news partner, the Providence Journal, Ed Fitzpatrick. Now let's get down to business. We'll begin with 1-minute opening remarks from each of our candidates. And I want to ask the audience here to hold your applause until the very end of the debate so everyone here at PPAC and those watching at home can hear from the candidates. The order for opening statements was determined by a drawing. We begin with Allan Fung. Mr. Fung was elected mayor of Cranston in 2008, where he's in his third term. Before that, he was legal counsel for MetLife. Mr. Fung was also a state prosecutor. He graduated Rhode Island College and Suffolk University Law School. Mr. Fung, your opening remarks.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, WPRI and the Providence Journal, for hosting this gubernatorial debate. Welcome, everyone. I'm Mayor Allan Fung. I'm a Rhode Islander born and raised and privileged to be the three-term mayor of the great city of Cranston. And during that time, we've had an opportunity to stabilize our city's finances. And for the third year in a row, we have not had to raise property taxes. And we did it by consolidating services, reducing personnel, reforming our pension system, moving employees into 401ks. These are real reforms, real results. Most importantly, we've partnered with our businesses and worked to make sure that Cranston is open for business, and we've created an environment where 1,000 new jobs have been created. Clearly, the number one issue in this election is jobs, and that's why I'm running for governor, to put people back to work. I've done it in Cranston, and I can do it for the state of Rhode Island. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Fung. Now, Ken Block. Mr. Block ran for governor in 2010 as a moderate party candidate. Prior to that, he worked for GTech. Mr. Block founded 2 software companies. He's a graduate of Dartmouth College. Mr. Block, your opening remarks.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody in the audience and those at home watching this evening. I want to thank you for caring enough about Rhode Island to tune in. I'd like to introduce my family who's in the audience tonight. My wife, Jennifer, who's a 6th grade science teacher, my 12-year-old son, Sam, and my 10-year-old daughter, Anna, and my father, who's in the audience as well. I own 2 small businesses in Warwick. And people ask me, why are you running for governor? And the answer is quite simple. I'm running because I don't want to see my kids leave this state to find jobs when they graduate. I want to make sure that my children can have a future here in Rhode Island. We need to make Rhode Island competitive. Career insiders, political insiders, have hurt our state, and only an outsider with the right skills and the right abilities can fix what's broken here. Ladies and gentlemen, together we will fix Rhode Island.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now to the topics at hand. As you know, there is no strict format to tonight's debate. We're looking for an open and honest discussion of the issues. We will allow for some back and forth. In fact, we encourage it as long as it's on topic. We have a lot of ground to cover tonight, so if I feel like you are taking too long or you're not answering the question, I will jump in. And of course, the number one rule, as you both know, obey the moderator. All right, here's our first question. And we'll start with Mr. Fung. Of any of the campaigns, Republican or Democrat, you were the first to go on TV with a negative ad. You called your opponent's supporters blockheads. How do you defend insulting voters in the primary right off the bat?
The voters of Rhode Island, particularly the voters in a Republican primary, deserve to know the truth about Ken Block and what he stands for and what he said in the past, because the past is the best indicator of future performance. The stakes in this election are way too high. It's about our jobs and the economy. And My opponent has a history of supporting Barack Obama, not once, but twice, and for Obamacare, because that election in 2012 was an indictment about Obamacare and the president's performance during those past 4 years. And I think the voters of our state, the voters, particularly in the Republican primary, deserve to know who this individual is. And I stand by those ads.
So your entire argument here for the Republican primary is that your opponent voted for Barack Obama twice. So that's it, right? Beyond that, you're okay with Ken Block?
No, there's a lot of policy difference, and that's why I said words matter. The stakes are really too high, because he did say he supported Obamacare. He said on newsmakers, I bought what Barack Obama was selling. He said in front of the Cranston City Committee similar words.
I happen to host that show, so I was there. He also said that he fairly regrets that issue because he was hoping that that would help to reduce health care costs, and he regrets it now.
But there was a lot of discussion during that time about the taxes that we're paying and the resulting consequences that would come to a state like Rhode Island. When you take a look at what Rhode Island is having to occur now, Health Source Rhode Island and those attendant costs, anywhere between $20 to $26 million, was a result of Obamacare. The increases that we're likely to see in our Medicaid costs as a result of Obamacare. Shame on Mr. Block if he did not do his homework, because on top of that, I think Republican voters cannot forgive him for starting the moderate party. He had to take a poll to come into our party and determine that he wants to represent us. I, on the other hand, have been a conservative, have been putting forward conservative principles in Cranston. I came over more for ideological reasons.
Why don't we have you respond there? He says, shame on you for not doing your homework. Respond.
My opponent would love to make a big deal, in fact, he does make a big deal, about the fact that I voted for a Democrat. What Rhode Islanders worry about, what they really care about, is the fix to the awful economic crisis that we're in. They want to make sure that the educations that our children get is the best that they can get, and the state is failing at providing these two necessary things. The mayor has made this not only the central part of his platform, he's pretty much made it the only argument that he has. It's an insult to voters, and it's quite frankly a junior high school level of campaigning. Did you know that Mayor Fung was a registered Democrat, and he donated to Democrats like Congressman David Cicilline, disgraced Speaker Gordon Fox, and even Mr. Obamacare, Harry Reid? This campaign should not be about who I voted for or how many Democrats he donated to. We have serious issues that the voters of Rhode Island want to see addressed, and I can't wait to address those issues for you here tonight.
We are going to dive in, of course, a lot of those issues in jobs and the economy, but I want you to jump in there. He's questioning your Republican credentials. You donated to a laundry list of Democrats. Respond.
When you take a look at it, it's about results, not rhetoric. I've been a Republican throughout my entire public service career. And, excuse me, it's the height of hypocrisy when you're talking about donations, because I'm not going to sit here and get lectured by an individual who voted for Barack Obama not once, but twice, for Obamacare, and someone who's constantly flip-flopping after he took a poll to determine that he wanted to come to the Republican Party. I've got the track record of helping support candidates at the local, state, and federal level. I've helped build the party in the Cranston Republican Party. I've helped try to put people into the state party as well, supporting candidates, donating to them. In fact, it hurt when I found out exactly how much I've donated to Republican candidates during my career, close to $20,000. That's real results.
I just want to drill down, before we move on to the Obama thing one more time. Are you saying because Ken Block voted twice for Barack Obama, he's lying to voters about where he stands now and what he'd do as governor if he wins?
I think what I'm saying is everything that comes out of Ken Block's mouth has to be examined closely, because he's flip-flopped more than John Kerry on many issues. Obamacare is one. We've heard his stances on guns change. We've heard his stances on deep water wind change. What else? That's what Republican voters and the people of Rhode Island need to know. and words matter. The stakes are too high in this election.
You know, Mr. Block, for many Republicans out there, this is a big deal that, you know, they may take issue that you voted with a guy that is hugely unpopular in the GOP twice.
I understand that, Tim. I've brought forward and proposed a plan to save the taxpayers of Rhode Island $1 billion. My team helped the state of Texas find and recover $1 billion of savings just in their food stamp program alone. I find it very interesting that the mayor brought up guns as an issue that I'm changed my position on, because the mayor, when he was a city councilman, actually passed legislation to restrict guns rights. Now, he'll tell you that he changed his mind, but apparently only the mayor is allowed to change his position on the issues over time, and I'm not.
All right, we're going to dive into some of those specifics that he just mentioned right there. Let's go to a question now from WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
Rhode Island, as you both know, is facing large and growing budget shortfalls in the coming years. The next governor will need to close a deficit of more than $400 million by the final year of his or her term, and a lot of that is due to the new casinos coming online in Massachusetts. Mr. Block, as you just said, you've pledged to save Rhode Island $1 billion during your first term, a third of it from inside the state budget. That comes out to about $330 million in budget cuts during your first term. What is the biggest item you plan to cut inside the state budget, and how much do you expect to save there?
Thank you for the question. The federal government estimates that in the Medicaid spending program alone nationwide, the amount of waste and fraud comes out to at least 7%. Now, I've never heard the federal government ever overestimate a number like that. We spend $2 billion annually on Medicaid. Roughly half of that is state money. 7% of $2 billion is $140 million, and Rhode Island does a pretty miserable job of identifying this fraud and recovering it. Most of our state employees fill out a paper-based timesheet. We believe that the cost of that program approaches somewhere between $10 to $20 million a year to simply push that paper around in a manner appropriate to the 1950s, but certainly not the year 2014. There are a great many places that we can look to save the money that we need to drive down the cost of government and make ourselves economically competitive. Interestingly, my competitor doesn't believe you can save $1 billion in the state budget. The one-third of $1 billion that you identified.
You don't believe that either. You've said
I'm sorry, not the state budget. One-third of $1 billion.
Budget.
I misspoke. My competitor has said, his campaign has said, you can't find $1 billion. You said we're going to try and find a third of $1 billion in the state budget. That amounts to 1% of the state budget. Now, I don't know any Republican, in fact, I hardly know a person in this state who doesn't believe that we can't find and save 1% out of our state budget.
Let me ask you a different question about your policy proposals, Mr. Block, related. You've, on the campaign trail, proposed further reductions to the estate tax, the sales tax, the capital gains tax, as well as a new $40 million local aid program to reduce the car tax. How can you afford those new tax cuts when there's already a deficit coming in the hundreds of millions of dollars, because that would add more money that needs to be filled in the budget?
There's no question. Every program that I'm proposing here this evening, that I proposed throughout this whole campaign, we will find the savings for. I'm the only candidate with a demonstrated ability to look at government spending programs and find the efficiencies necessary to realize that cost savings. We will find this savings, and we will drive down these taxes that we must drive down to become economically competitive with our neighbors.
Mr. Fung, you recently proposed $200 million in new tax cuts that would reduce Rhode Island's corporate, estate, and sales taxes. Again, with the state facing these deficits up to $400 million by 2019, what specific spending cuts will you look for to fund your tax cuts and close the deficit?
Well, unlike my opponent, my plan is realistic. And it addresses and makes us, if we implement that $200 million tax reduction plan, one of the most competitive in the Northeast, with the cuts in the corporate tax, cutting in half that minimum corporate tax, the estate tax to get it to the federal level, and getting our sales tax equal to Massachusetts to stop the flight. What I proposed when I proposed that tax cut was also reductions, 5% reduction in personnel costs, making sure that we don't pay that $12.5 million for 38 studios. On top of that, we're going to continue to attack the state budget and slow its growth to the rate of inflation. And how are we going to do that? Looking at the budget realistically, making sure that we see programs where there might be deficits being run. For instance, RIPTA. Let's see if we can better handle RIPTA through a private entity. Let's take that examination. Let's take a look at personnel costs when we're talking about cuts. Why is it that a state our size, comparable to New Hampshire, has a bigger budget for the governor's office and the General Assembly when there's more members in the General Assembly in New Hampshire? Those are the areas we really have to tackle, and that's where experience counts.
You mentioned personnel. Would that be a 5% cut in all state departments you're proposing?
What we did in Cranston when we first got in and had the fiscal mess that we did was we implemented 10% cuts, but we also had it based upon asking each of the directors, look, I need what you really need, not what you want, and based it upon performance measures for the year. And that's the similar approach that we'll do in as governor for the state of Rhode Island. Unfortunately, my opponent's touting of his billion-dollar plan is bogus. We've heard that 1/3 of his plan be attacked by someone who's very experienced, and that's Governor Allan. Just a few short weeks ago, he came out and said it's not realistic. And this is why experience counts. If you're going to go into looking at budgets, you need to have the dedication and detail and experience, and that's what Rhode Islanders need right now.
Mr. Block, I'll allow you to respond on that. He said that your plan is bogus.
Great. You know, when I joined the Republican Party, never in a million years did I think I'd be criticizing for wanting to reduce the size of government. Talk about unrealistic. My opponent is booking $13 million of savings in the budget from not paying 38 studios. What we've just saw in the legislative session that's just about to wrap up is our General Assembly has no interest whatsoever in doing anything but paying off those bonds. I don't know how the mayor will ever find that $13 million because I don't believe this General Assembly has any interest in cooperating with that plan for him.
Mr. Fung, that ship has sailed. They made the clear indication they're going to pay those bonds from here on out.
But then it has to go in year after year. And that's where the governor's role in that leadership role, I will stand with the taxpayers of Rhode Island every time in the budget.
Will you veto any budget that has that $13 million payment in there, even if it has the other elements that you like?
That's why it's so important to push for a constitutional convention for a line item veto.
Yes or no? Yes or no? Would you veto any budget that has that in there?
Yes, I would veto a budget. Just to send a message, it's that important that I would stand with the taxpayers around, because it is very important. When we're talking about putting $12.5 million that can be used in other areas, particularly with respect to business development, helping create jobs, that's how we're going to build this economy back up. We need more facts on 38 studios before we make that payment.
Okay, we're going to go now to a question from Ed Fitzpatrick of the Providence Journal.
When the Democratic candidates for governor were on the stage just last week, they had a hard time identifying sharp differences in their stances on public policy. Thus far, you two have been critical of each other, but you've taken similar stances on issues ranging from cutting taxes to eliminating the master lever to not paying the 38 studios bonds. So tonight, can you name one major policy stance that distinguishes you from your opponent regarding what you would do in office? Let's start with Mr. Fung.
Outside of the Barack Obama policy difference, one of the things that I won't support, will not support, as part of his billion-dollar plan that I consider bogus, is when he says 2/3 of his dollars are going to be outside the budget. One of those areas is in unemployment. What he's talking about is raising costs of unemployment insurance for certain industries, seasonal industries. We're talking about hospitality and tourism, industries that I came out of because my parents had a small Chinese restaurant. What he's talking about is cost shifting and increasing significantly those costs to many of those industries, many of those employers, many of whom are struggling. people in the construction industry, agriculture, and that's not right. Raising taxes is not the way to go about doing it. What we need to do is reform the entire system, whether it's shortening the reform period, reducing benefits, or making sure that people don't have opportunities to continue to game that system year after year. That's a fundamental difference.
Before we go back to Ed, why don't, Mr. Block, you take 30 seconds to respond to the unemployment insurance?
Thank you. And I was going to talk about this area in any event, so I'll just roll both into my reply and to amplify at the same time. The major difference between myself and the mayor is that I know we can find that savings, and I have a proven track record of doing it. The mayor has raised taxes. The mayor has mismanaged the city of Cranston, and we're going to get to that in a little while. The way you fix the unemployment insurance system in Rhode Island is the way that a great many other states have already fixed their system. Rhode Island's unemployment insurance system is ranked the worst in the country because of the manner in which we operate it. The system is fundamentally unfair to the vast majority of employers in this state who are paying way too much in unemployment insurance because a small number of employers abuse the system and lay the same people off at the same time of year every year, year after year. When that happens, it's no longer insurance. It's something else. It is the subsidization of this small number of employers' payrolls by the majority of employers in this state. That's wrong. It's broken. A great many other states have fixed that, and we need to fix that too.
Unless this is your answer, Ed's original question was, what would you identify as your one major policy difference from your opponent, Mr. Fung?
And the major policy difference is I believe, and I know that we will find the savings necessary. Mayor Fung doesn't believe that he can. Mayor Fung relies on made-up numbers, $13 million from 38 studios, a $70 million budget deficit, the way he's going to pay for his $200 million program. That may or may not be there. I'm going to guess it's most likely not going to be there. There's a gigantic difference between our two approaches.
A $70 million surplus?
Surplus, that's right.
Okay. All right, let's move on to our next topic. In our latest WPRI Providence Journal poll, I know this won't come as any surprise, but the #1 issue on the minds of primary voters was the economy and jobs. And Mr. Block, we will start with this with you here tonight. And I want to ask you the same question that I asked the Democrats last week, so I hope you watched the debate. And that is, what is the one element you want people to remember about your jobs plan when they walk out of this theater tonight?
Thank you. Jobs and the economy are the most important issues facing our state. We are in an economic crisis. The reason we suffer, the reason we have the country's highest unemployment rate and one of the worst ranked economic climates is because we have allowed our economy to unwind. Because of our bad economic climate, we have high unemployment. We have to become economically competitive with Massachusetts. We have to drive down the cost of doing business because, let's face it, when you're driving down the road and you see two gas stations next to each other, and one is selling gasoline for 25 cents a gallon less than the other gas station, you are going to pull into the gas station with the cheaper gasoline. It's the same issue with businesses, and right now, because of our economic climate, way too many businesses choose to go to Massachusetts as opposed to coming here to Rhode Island. That dynamic has to be addressed. That is what my 3-2-1 plan does.
You know, with 50,000 people roughly out of work, they might not hear a lot of immediate relief in that. What you're asking here or saying is your big plan is to turn around the economic climate in Rhode Island. I mean, how long can the 50,000 people that are out of work now expect that to take?
Well, here's the great thing about this state. We are a small state. We're not a large state. That means that the changes that we make can have a much more immediate impact on the problems that we have right now. I believe that we can turn this state around in a short number of years, especially if we attack the worst of the taxes that make us uncompetitive. And by the way, the #1 tax that kills us in terms of economic climate is in fact the unemployment insurance tax, the one tax that Mayor Fung proposes that we leave alone.
Mr. Fung, with his overall plan of turning around the climate here, is there anything in there that you liked in his ideas?
No, I'm glad that Ken copied a lot of my tax reduction plans,
So
but
that's a yes.
I went further, and my tax reduction plan is the furthest cuts of all of the gubernatorial candidates have been out there. And it's going to send a message to those businesses that are here in Rhode Island struggling, as well as businesses outside, that Rhode Island means business, that we're open for business. That's what we have to do. We just saw in the Providence Journal article on Sunday about the outside developer that was afraid to come in and bid on that 195 project. They want stability. Employers want stability. CEOs want stability. And if you send a message through these deep tax cuts, that's going to send a message that we care about them, particularly those that are struggling through this economy now. But on this 3-2-1 plan, it sounds great. Every time, we hear politicians like Herman Cain come out with his 999 plan, it sounds great. But when you take that deep dive into what is behind that plan, 3 minus 2 minus 1 equals 0. It's a lot of rhetoric. And, I take offense at Mr. Block saying that I don't care about unemployment. What I'm saying is we have to reform the system, not shift costs and raise taxes on one industry, particularly the hospitality industry. And Dale Venturini from the Hospitality Association, if you're watching out there, you should be afraid if Mr. Block is going to be governor, because he is going to raise taxes on unemployment for many of yours industry. And our industry right now is being propped up by many in the hospitality industry.
30 seconds response, Mr. Block.
And I would say to the CEOs of Raytheon and G-Tech and every other large corporation that's here in the state, you ought to watch out for Mayor Fung. He doesn't have your best interests at heart. He's pandering to a very small slice of the business community in the same way that he panders to special interests in a great many areas in the way he governs as well.
All right, we're going to go to a question from Ted Nesi. Ted.
Back to budgets. You're both talking a lot about cutting spending tonight, but before Lincoln Chafee took office, Rhode Island had Republican governors for 16 straight years. During that time, the size of the state budget nearly more than quadrupled, from less than $2 billion to nearly $8 billion. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with Democrats running the General Assembly, but those Republican governors couldn't stop that large growth in the budget. Mr. Fung, what do you think Governor Allan and Governor Kucheri did wrong, and what will you do differently to avoid that kind of situation on your watch?
Well, first of all, I've done a lot of it in Cranston, even with an overwhelmingly Democratic legislative body. We've worked with them. We've put a lot of our plans out there. When I first got into office, I inherited a fiscal disaster. We not only had a structural deficit from the last administration, but not 1 year, but multi-year cuts coming from the governor's office and the General Assembly. That is going to have to change, because we have to focus on many of the individuals that are there working together. But how we also achieved a lot of change in Cranston was we tried to work together, putting out a lot of plans, but if they're not going to follow those plans, then we took it to the people of Cranston, and they listened. And they sent a message about their trust in me and what we did to turn the state around. They believed in the reforms that we put forward on the pension reform. They believed in the cuts in personnel that we had to also do. So there are a lot that we're going to have to do working together, and if not, we're going to have to use the power of the bully pulpit. And the governor also can't be afraid to wield the power of the executive order.
How large was Cranston's budget when you took office, and how large is it now?
Right now, the budget that was just passed is about $260 million. When I first took office, it was about 200. Oh, God. I'm sorry, I forget. I'm blanking. It was like in the 230 to 240 range. I don't remember the exact number.
So it sounds like you have confidence that you can do something different with the Democratic General Assembly to avoid budget growth on your watch, even though you praise Governor Allan for the growth for what happened during his tenure?
But it was different times too, Ted. And this is one of the things we have to take each budget year by year, depending on the circumstances. And I asked my department directors in Cranston to present a budget based upon what they need, performance measures about what really is going on within their different departments, zero-based budgeting. And that's what we have to do to attack the state budget as well.
Mr. Block, same question to you. The budget grew from less than $2 billion to nearly $8 billion under Republican governors. What would you do differently from Governor Allan and Governor Kucheri to avoid that sort of situation on your watch?
A lot of people try and draw parallels to the waste and fraud work that I have already done for the state and that I'd like to continue doing for the state. and the big audit that Governor Kucheri ran. The big audit was a fishing expedition without any real targets in mind. And I'm able to tell the voters of this state exactly where we are going to look for the savings necessary to pull this state out. What's interesting about the mayor is he talks about his fiscal responsibility, but when he was asking for tax increases as mayor, oftentimes his Democrat city council had to reduce the size of the tax increases that the mayor was asking for. The Democratic city council was acting more Republican than its Republican mayor.
We'll let Mr. Fung respond in a second to that, but first, keeping on this question of how a Republican governor works with the General Assembly, sometimes it sounds like you're running against the General Assembly as much as Mr. Fung. You're very critical of the leadership there. How would you work with those same Democrats, particularly Senate President Paiva Weed, if you take office and need them to achieve your priorities?
The governor's office, in my opinion, is all about the bully pulpit. I've been talking about that since the day that I announced my candidacy. And I've been using the bully pulpit. We've used it in the effort to get rid of the master lever, an effort that I'm happy to say I believe will be successful. Sometime this week, I believe Rhode Island is going to take a step that most other states have already taken. We're going to eliminate the master lever in this state, and it's only because of the following reason. We got people to care, we got people to show up, we got people to turn out in the State House in numbers big enough to convince the General Assembly that to do the right thing. And when it comes to economic issues, my job as governor is to rally the business community, and hundreds of business owners have already committed to me that they'll show up when I ask them to come. They'll come to the State House and advocate on their own behalf to help fix the unemployment insurance mess and to fix the other programs that we have that are in desperate need of being fixed.
Okay, we have to move this debate along, but I do allow Mr. Fung 30 seconds to respond. He says that the Democratic council in your city had to pull you back from raising taxes more than 3 years ago.
You know, and this is coming from an individual who's never experienced a fiscal crisis or handled a fiscal crisis like what we've encountered in Cranston during these tough times, because we have implemented many fiscal policies, and a lot of the changes that we've done, from the pension reforms that we've done, moving people into 401ks, reducing personnel, as well as consolidating services, have led to the point where we haven't had to raise taxes these past 3 years. So those are the real results that people rely upon.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fung. Now let's go to a question from Ed Fitzpatrick of the Providence Journal.
We've received a lot of emails on the topic of guns. So, Mr. Block, when you ran for governor in 2010, you filled out an NRA questionnaire saying you supported banning the lawful manufacture and possession of very large caliber and fully automatic and semi-automatic weapons. Is that still your position?
That is not my position. I've been educated since I've entered this race. My position on guns has been straightforward and clear from the moment that I declared my candidacy. Rhode Island is the 5th most regulated state in the country in terms of gun regulations. We don't need more gun laws. What we need to do is enforce the laws that we already have on the books.
Mr. Fung, as a Cranston councilman in 2004, you voted in favor of a non-binding resolution calling for Congress to renew a nationwide ban on assault weapons. Is that still your position?
No, actually, my position on guns has evolved as well. But it's evolved naturally, not because I am running for governor. In fact, how it evolved was, you have to understand where I'm coming from. When I grew up in South Providence, and we saw a lot of other issues cropping up. You know, criminals with guns. My parents, who are also in the audience, taught me not to, not to touch a firearm. I came from a different background, but it's evolved. And even during the time I was a prosecutor, I saw a lot of victims of, situations involving criminals. But right now, I can tell you that I do support the Second Amendment. I have become a recreational shooter, not now, but back in 2008, 2009 timeframe, when my current chief of staff and also my director of administration took me out shooting, educated me about firearms. And one thing that I do realize is it's about the individual. We really have to focus any laws on the individuals, criminals and those with mental health issues. Those are the real root of the problem, and any legislation should be aimed at them and not at law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, I was curious, Mr. Fung, are you a gun owner?
No, I'm not. But I do
Block?
shoot recreationally.
And Mr. Block.
I'm not a gun owner.
Well, that warms us up nicely to the next segment of the debate, and that is our rapid fire section. As you know, this is an hour long. We're already more than halfway through this, so I want to try and get through some topics quickly, and I'm looking for one-word answers. A candidate's nightmare. Now, Mr. Block, I know this will be difficult for you, so brace yourself. As a governor, would you sign a bill that would abolish the master lever, also known as straight ticket voting?
Yes.
Mr. Fung.
Absolutely.
Mr. Fung, we'll start with you. Are you pro-choice or pro-life?
I'm pro-choice, but I personally do not support late-term abortions.
And Mr. Block.
I'm pro-choice, but I do not believe that the role of governor is to push my personal views down onto anybody.
Yes or no, if you become governor, will you pledge to order an independent commission to investigate the 38 Studios deal? Mr. Block.
Absolutely yes.
And Mr. Fung.
Yes.
As governor, would you sign a bill, yes or no, that would establish a legal market for licensed businesses to sell marijuana to adults 21 years of age or older? Mr. Fung.
Not at this time.
And Mr. Block.
Not at this time.
Mr. Block, we'll stay with you. What letter grade, A through F, would you give to Rhode Island's last Republican governor, Don Kachiri? We only have an hour,
I'd
Mr.
have to
Block.
say a B minus. I'd say a B minus.
And Mr. Fung.
I would say a C because of Deepwater and also 38 Studios.
Mr. Fung, do you support driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants? Yes or no?
No.
Mr. Block.
No.
And we'll end rapid fire here. Mr. Block, you and your opponent both oppose the minimum wage going to $10.10 an hour. The House Labor Committee passed a bill that would raise it to $9 an hour in 2015. As governor, would you sign that into law?
At this time, I would not, because we need to remain competitive with Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is not there.
And Mr. Fung, your answer?
I would not sign at this time either.
Would either of you want to see the minimum wage lowered then? Or are you happy with where it is at $8 an hour?
I'm happy where it is.
I'm fine with where it is.
Okay, we'll go to a question from Ted Nisi.
And actually, these questions are from viewers tonight. Each of you, we had questions we received that we wanted to put to you. Mr. Block, the first question is for you, and it comes from Keith in West Warwick. Keith says, quote, I feel that you cost the Republican Party the governor's election in 2010. Why did you stay in that race when you didn't have a chance to win, and those votes would have put John Robitaille in as governor?
Thank you for the question. In 2008, when we decided to start the moderate party, the governor's race in 2010 wasn't even a thought. In the quest to build that party, we had to get a federal law, a state law declared unconstitutional in federal court. And after we accomplished that in 2009, then we learned that the state had a really awful law that said the only way to keep the party qualified was somebody had to run for governor and get at least 5% of the vote. That is how I ended up getting into politics as a candidate. It wasn't by choice. It was by executive committee telling me I had to be the guy to do it. Now, I know John Robitaille is in the audience tonight, and he has told Rhode Island that he doesn't hold that against me, that he's looking forward and he's not looking backward. And I believe that the most important thing that we can do as Rhode Islanders to fix the problems that we have at hand here is to look forward and measure the candidates based on what they're talking about doing, moving ahead.
I'll disappoint you and look backward again. Do you disagree with Keith that your running cost John Robitaille that election?
I don't think anybody on this earth can look backwards in an election as complex as 2010 and make any kind of determination like that whatsoever.
Mr. Fung, do you want to respond to that? 30 seconds.
Oh, I will certainly look backwards and say yes. I would rather have seen John Robitaille, a Republican, implementing fiscally conservative principles rather than Governor Lincoln Chafee.
Any response to that, Mr. Block?
I can't disagree.
All right. Mr. Fung, the question for you comes from Josh in your home city of Cranston. A year ago, you allowed an ordinance to take effect in Cranston that blocks food trucks from operating within 1,000 feet of restaurants. Josh says the ordinance, quote, effectively made it impossible for food trucks to operate profitably in Cranston. And a national group, the Institute for Justice, has called Cranston's food truck ban one of the worst vending restrictions in the country. Josh asks, how do you reconcile your supposed image as a small government reformer with your failure to fight such heavy government regulation?
The opposition that we received in Cranston was from many of the existing business owners that had several food trucks that were right in front of them, hurting their business. Now, was 1,000 feet, too restrictive? It could have been. But based upon the testimony, we were working with many business owners. If you know now, that ordinance has been amended to provide a little bit more flexibility for the innovation of food trucks. And that's where, a lot of times experience counts, so that you take a look at what has happened, you make your changes, and move forward. And we've moved forward with that industry.
You didn't sign the ordinance, however. You also didn't veto it. You just allowed it to take effect without your signature.
That's correct.
Why didn't you sign it if it sounds like you supported it?
I'm sorry, which one was that? The amended one? Or
the original food truck ordinance.
No, because I did have some concerns, because I didn't want to stifle innovation. But the problem that I had was also trying to balance those restaurant owners that were having many food trucks right in front of their restaurants. And you've got to make sure that there is some delicate balance between the two, and not throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So the amendment came, I think it was a few months ago, and there was a crafted amendment working together, reasonable compromise, where it allows that flexibility for food trucks to have a place within the city of Cranston.
Mr. Block, would you have signed the food truck ordinance?
I don't know any of the specifics about that issue, so I can't really weigh in, although listening to the mayor two-step around the issue, what came to mind was political insider.
All right, we're going to move to a question now from Ed Fitzpatrick of the Providence Journal. Ed.
In April, Brown University hosted an environmental forum for candidates for governor. I didn't see either one of you there. So let me ask you, how would you prepare Rhode Island for the future challenge of climate change? And as governor, would you sign the Resilient Rhode Island Act, a bill that would help communities adapt to climate change and set targets for reducing greenhouse gases? Let's start with Mr. Block.
Yeah. I wasn't at that forum because well before we were informed of the forum, we had other commitments that we had made. To fix something as big as climate change, it's something that rests federally. It's something that what Rhode Island can possibly do here would have very little to minimal impact. And I'll tell you as governor, the warming that I'm most concerned about is making sure that Rhode Islanders have the means to heat their homes in the winter.
Ed?
Would you sign the bill, the Resilient Rhode Island Act?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
It's called the Resilient Rhode Island Act. Would you sign it as governor?
I don't know what's in that act, so I can't say.
All right, Mr. Fung.
Yeah. Actually, my concern about that bill is imposing more mandates as a government, and basically what you're asking us to do from Rhode Island, a tiny state, and as governor trying to make a large impact on our global climate. As governor, I'm never going to be able to stop a hurricane, but what I can change is the business climate, and that's where we have to focus right now, is jobs in the economy. These are the issues that are very important right now to the people of the state of Rhode Island, getting people back to work. On that bill, I'd have to take a look at it, but based on what I know so far, I would not be inclined to sign it.
We received a couple of emails on this next topic, including from Dave in Cranston. He had a question about the police department scandal in your city, Mr. Fung. Look, I'm not looking to litigate what is going on over there, so let me just distill his question. Mr. Fung, issues with your police department have plagued the last year of your administration as mayor, from a ticketing scandal to a police captain who is suing the city. Many people, including this viewer, may question your ability to lead the state when on a smaller scale, things at the department have been such a mess. What do you say?
Well, I do believe in holding people accountable. We brought in the state police, we took decisive action, brought in the state police, and when we did, we asked them to take a look at the ticketing issue, but also to give me an objective assessment of the entire department.
You brought in the state police after the media discovered the ticketing scandal issue. Is that correct?
No, not necessarily. The time frame of what happened was back in December when it was brought to light through I think it was a records request from the media, which is absolutely correct about that incident. Once that happened, we started taking it very seriously, started the investigation. At a point in time, we called in the state police for two reasons. Not only on the ticketing issue, but also to give me an objective assessment of the entire department. And right now, we have an opportunity to move the department, move the city forward.
Mr. Fung, the ticketing scandal was well in the news cycle for weeks before you held a news conference announcing that the state police were coming in. So a lot of people may look at that and say, wait a minute, he didn't react until things were getting really ugly.
No, I disagree with that, because bottom line is we have a lot of good men and women within the police department in the city of Cranston, and we are holding people accountable. We have the opportunity now to get a new police chief, to move the department forward in the best interest of the residents of Cranston. We've held the people accountable, and we've taken decisive action on the officer that was involved with the ticketing issue, and we've moved forward with our recommendation of termination.
Mr. Block, it's easy to criticize Mayor Fung on this, as you did in your TV ad, but is that really fair? I mean, if you become governor, should you be held accountable for the actions of everyone below you?
In the circumstance of a local police department and when your job is the mayor, 1,000% yes. Mayor Fung, in his defense of his actions and mismanagement of the police department, claimed he was not micromanaging his police department. I don't believe he was macromanaging his police department. Mayor Fung mismanaged that police department so badly. Mr. Mayor, if you can't manage your own local police department, how can you ask these voters for a promotion to be governor? And I want to be clear about the timeline of what happened very quickly. You accepted money from the same police union you negotiated the contract with. You negotiated a contract that was so rich that your democratically controlled city council rejected it, precipitating the tickets. And then you did not bring in the police department. You asked your police department to investigate itself, and then you asked an outsider from New Jersey, of all places, to come in and investigate, and only an hour before your city council was going to vote to force you to bring in the state police, did you then bring in the state police. This is not governance, this is not leadership, this is disqualification from governor, in my opinion.
Mr. Fung.
First of all, I'm a little disappointed in Ken's statement, because no one during the time I've been governor, or even during my professional career, has anyone questioned my ethics. Now, I'm not going to sit here on stage when the one person on the stage who has been fined by the State Board of Elections for funneling money into his moderate party. Let me be clear. I've always put the Cranston taxpayers first when I was negotiating. If we were negotiating unfair contracts, how can we have 3 straight years of no tax increases? Do you believe that the union members liked when we had to lay people off? Do you think union members liked when we had to freeze their COLAs so that we can save the pension plan? Do you think that they liked moving into 401ks like us in the private sectors? Do you think they liked when we fought for a mayoral academy? These are the results that I've put forward. And I'm not going to sit here having my ethics questioned. But the bottom line is this: we acted and we held people accountable, even in the police department, where we've moved with that recommendation of termination on that officer. But what Mr. Block also conveniently forgets is we've done that in the past. We've taken strong action and fired 2 other officers in the past during my administration for improper actions while they were on duty. We will hold people accountable. My administration has a record of doing that. And when you're dealing with over 600 employees, a lot of things can happen. And I understand that Ken doesn't have that experience coming from a small business background.
Mr. Block, I'll allow you some time to respond.
Yeah. Mr. Fung, I am questioning your judgment. Absolutely. When you were asked on Tim White's show about accepting campaign contributions from the very same union members that you were actively negotiating contracts with, and you were asked, do you see that as a conflict of interest? And your answer was, no, I do not. And in fact, I accept money from a lot of other unions as well. But I can't imagine a more non-Republican answer than that one. But when it comes to judgment and ethics, the fact that you don't see that conflict of interest, to me, is one of the most worrisome things I've heard you say tonight.
Mr. Fung, briefly.
The fact that you were fined and had to admit that you funneled money illegally in the moderate party speaks for itself.
All right, let's go to a question from Ted Nisi.
Both of you are running as strongly pro-business candidates. You've said tonight you're going to look out for the business community, yet both of you are also opposed to paying off the bonds sold in 2010 to benefit 38 studios. The Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce's president recently pleaded with lawmakers to pay the bonds, saying, quote, a decision to default could have widespread and dire consequences when it comes to a multitude of Rhode Island's current and future economic development projects. Mr. Fung, is she wrong?
I do not believe so, because we haven't done our due diligence before making that decision about making that $12.5 million payment on an ongoing basis. When I say we haven't done our due diligence, we are in a lawsuit right now where there are allegations of fraud and intentional misrepresentation. And I can't believe that the governor and treasurer hired back the financial advisors who they sued when there are those allegations, but that's another story. On top of that, that SJ advisors report that was presented did not ask, in my opinion, the right questions of the people that we also really need to know
Mr.
about.
Fung, the question, though, is the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, voice of the business community, says, please pay the bonds. We're very concerned about the impact on Rhode Island's economy, and you would ignore that.
I'm telling the Providence Chamber, telling the people of the state of Rhode Island that, yes, I would not be paying it because we don't know all the facts. We have to stop making payments, whether it's government officials or anyone, without knowing all the underlying facts, especially when there's fraud, and particularly, Ted, particularly when the right question that needed to be asked is, what would the bond buyers do? I will stand every single day with the people of the state of Rhode Island, not Wall Street, on that, because we have to get all the adequate information before we move forward in paying that bond.
Mr. Block, same question to you. Why would you ignore the state's largest business advocacy organization on this issue?
For the simple reason that there is not unanimous agreement. In fact, it's very far. It's 50-50 in terms of what the actual impact of not paying off those bonds are. But let's face it, there's probably not a better issue in the state of Rhode Island that demonstrates the danger that insider politics represents to us, the taxpayers of Rhode Island, than 38 Studios, and the unwillingness of political insiders to go after and identify the truth and help us to understand how this possibly happened and who we are going to hold accountable for what has happened to us. We're not getting that investigation. The taxpayers aren't getting what we need to understand what happened and to make sure it hasn't happened and won't happen ever again. Until we get that, I believe we must stand firm and we should absolutely not pay those bonds.
What would you say to the head of the chamber then when she says, I'm very concerned about the impact this would have on our businesses regardless of how bad a deal this was?
There are more than one time where I haven't seen eye to eye with the head of the Providence Chamber of Commerce. This is one of them.
All right, I want to ask you both briefly, because I want to make sure we get to closing remarks, so answer these questions as quickly as you can. The Board of Education, Mr. Fung, gave illegal immigrants the ability to get in-state tuition at Rhode Island public colleges. Are you okay with that? And if not, what steps would you take to overturn that policy if elected?
You know, I was opposed to it originally, but from what I know right now, it has not had a great impact fiscally on the budget, so I would leave it alone for now.
All right, you wouldn't touch it. Mr. Block, you heard him. He wouldn't move to change it. Do you agree with that?
The rules of that program are folks who are in the process of obtaining their citizenship are the ones who are eligible for the tuition assistance, and I'm fully on board with that.
Okay. It wasn't exactly a wedding scene at the Game of Thrones tonight, but there was some back and forth here. So, Mr. Block, I'd like you to say something nice about your opponent.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that. And, Allan, I really I find it admirable that you helped your parents in their small business when you were younger. I respect that. I respect every small business owner in their state. I'm sure that that was formative for you, and I'm sure that it stands you in good stead as you're moving ahead.
And
in
Mr.
life.
Fung, briefly.
Sure, and you know, I definitely do appreciate, Ken, your dedication on the master lever, because it was an important issue and one that I was impacted by personally back in 2006. So, you know, I appreciate your dedication on that issue.
All right. Well, with all that in mind, Mr. Fung, if Mr. Block wins, will you endorse him in the general election?
I've always supported the Republican candidate, and I will do so if it's Mr. Block.
And Mr. Block, if Mr. Fung wins?
Absolutely, and of course.
Okay. Now, each of the candidates will have a chance to make their closing remarks. A reminder to our live audience to hold your applause until the very end when both candidates have given their 60-second remarks. Again, the order for closing statements was determined by a drawing. We begin with Allan Fung. Mr. Fung, your closing remarks.
Thank you, WPRI and Providence Journal, for hosting this very important gubernatorial debate. Thanks to all attendants and the audience at home. Tonight, you heard a very stark contrast between myself and my opponent. My opponent has supported Barack Obama not once but twice, supported Obamacare, and gave us 4 years of Governor Lincoln Chafee. I, on the other hand, have served as a proud Republican throughout my career of public service. Rhode Island needs a proven leader, and it needs it now. In Cranston, we've done that. We've consolidated services, cut from the budget, we've moved new employees into 401ks, reformed our pension system, saving $6.5 million in 1 year. And there's no tax increases for the past 3 years for the property owners. Because of these reforms, I'm proud to say we've been able to create 1,000 new private sector jobs. And on day one of a Fung administration, we're going to make sure Rhode Island's open for business, and what we've done in Cranston, we're going to do for the state of Rhode Island to ensure there are new jobs in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Fung. Now, Mr. Block, your 60-second closing remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to my plans and ideas for how to fix Rhode Island. Rhode Island suffers from a crisis in leadership. This crisis in leadership has led to the economic crisis that we suffer from today, an economic crisis that threatens us all. But it doesn't have to be that way. Insiders who put special interests ahead of the public interest is how we've gotten to the situation that we are in now. We are a small state. The good news is that our small size permits us to turn ourselves around much more quickly than if we are a large state. And this quick turnaround is not only possible, it's necessary. We can fundamentally fix what's broken in Rhode Island, but only if we elect an outsider, someone with bold plans and the proven ability to get the job done. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that together we will fix Rhode Island.
Thank you. Now to our live audience, your chance to applaud the candidates. We want to thank the Providence Performing Arts Center for having us here tonight. That does it for our Campaign 2014 Republican Gubernatorial debate. Be sure to watch Eyewitness News at 10 o'clock on Fox Providence and at 11 on WPRI 12 for a complete wrap-up of tonight's debate, as well as expert analysis. You can also follow our Campaign 2014 coverage on WPRI.com. You'll find our latest Eyewitness News Providence Journal poll there as well. In-depth analysis from our Eyewitness News analyst Joe Fleming, and make sure to read our top-notch online reporters Ted Nesi and Dan McGowan all political season. And online you can use our interactive poll results to break down those numbers. We'll certainly be talking a lot more politics in the weeks ahead, including a month of debates in July. We'll tackle the Democratic primaries for Rhode Island General Treasurer on Sunday, July 13th, Lieutenant Governor on July 20th, and Rhode Island Secretary of State on July 27th. You'll see all of those debates on Newsmakers, on WPRI 12 and Fox Providence, as well as online, WPRI.com. And we remind you that primary day is September 9th. For Ted Nesi and Ed Fitzpatrick, I'm Tim White. Thank you for watching, and good night from the Providence Performing Arts Center.